A bitter taste of change. Marcus Hayes wiped his brow with the back of his hand, the familiar warmth of the kitchen reminding him of all the years he'd spent here, perfecting his craft. The scent of freshly baked bread and simmering sauces filled the air, blending into the rhythmic clatter of pots and pans in the kitchen of Bellamont's Bistro, a renowned restaurant in the heart of New Orleans. For Marcus, it was more than just a job. It was a part of his identity. Here, amidst the hum of culinary precision, he had found a place where he could pour his soul into his dishes. Marcus had grown up with food in his blood, raised by his grandmother, a woman with hands seasoned by years of Southern cooking. Marcus had learned to see cooking as a form of art. Over time, his cooking evolved to reflect his heritage, blending traditional Southern flavors with European influences he'd studied. This unique fusion had gained him recognition, and for the past 7 years, Marcus had been a trusted chef at Bellamonte's. Known for his innovative dishes and approachable manner, he had become a cornerstone of the kitchen, someone his colleagues admired and respected. But the atmosphere had changed in recent weeks with the arrival of Jean-Pierre Laurent, a famed French chef with a reputation for running a tight kitchen. He'd been hired as both head chef and part owner. And the moment he entered, the place started to feel less like home. The staff had hoped he'd bring new energy, but instead, he brought a stiff, unforgiving air to the kitchen. Jean-Pierre was renowned for his devotion to traditional French cuisine and his disdain for anything that veered from it. On his first day, he had walked through the kitchen like a general inspecting his troops, his sharp gaze observing each person and every dish. When he reached Marcus's station, he'd stopped, his eyes narrowing as he examined the plate before him. "What's this?" Jean-Pierre asked, his tone dismissive. Marcus had spent hours perfecting the dish, a blend of Cajun spices with a French-style roux, a signature creation he'd been proud of. "It's a fusion of Southern and French flavors," Marcus replied, keeping his tone respectful. "I think it gives our customers a taste of something unique while staying true to Bellamont's roots." Jean-Pierre's face twisted with disapproval. "This is not Bellamont's. This is experimentation." He waved his hand dismissively over the dish without even tasting it. "We don't experiment with food here. We respect tradition." Marcus felt a sharp sting at Jean-Pierre's words, but kept his composure. "Tradition is important, Chef Laurent, but our customers also love new flavors." "I am the one who decides what the customers love," Jean-Pierre interrupted, his gaze hardening. "Keep to the classics, Mr. Hayes. Your experiments are not welcome here." Marcus swallowed his frustration, feeling the weight of Jean-Pierre's dismissal press on him. Over the following days, he watched as his schedule shifted. He was relegated to preparing routine dishes rather than being able to flex his creativity. His ideas, once welcomed with enthusiasm, were now met with icy stares or simply ignored. Bellamonte's, once his culinary sanctuary, was becoming a cold, unforgiving place. One afternoon, while Marcus prepared for the lunch rush, he overheard Jean-Pierre talking with the restaurant manager. They were discussing the upcoming menu overhaul. "We'll remove the fusion dishes," Jean-Pierre said, his voice laced with contempt. "And that means Marcus needs to learn his place or consider his options." The words were a gut punch. Learn his place. Marcus whispered to himself, barely able to believe his ears. It was as if his years of dedication and hard work had vanished with the arrival of this man who saw him as nothing more than an obstacle to his vision. Marcus tried to brush off the hurt, focusing instead on his love for cooking. He reminded himself that he wasn't just doing this for recognition, but because cooking was his passion. Yet, as weeks passed, Jean-Pierre's treatment became even more pointed. He would scrutinize Marcus's dishes more harshly than others, find fault in his methods, and with each passing day, chip away at his confidence. One day, the tension reached its peak. It was a busy Friday night, and the restaurant was packed with patrons. Marcus, assigned to create a dish he prepared countless times, crafted a plate with care and sent it up to the pass. But Jean-Pierre was waiting, and he took one look at the plate, and shook his head. "What is this, Marcus? Overdone," he said, lifting the plate with exaggerated disdain. "Do you even understand French cooking?" The comment was loud enough for the entire kitchen to hear, and Marcus felt the eyes of his coworkers on him, their expressions a mix of sympathy and discomfort. He clenched his jaw, forcing himself to stay calm. "I followed the exact specifications, Chef Laurent," Jean-Pierre scoffed. "If you can't get it right, then maybe this isn't the place for you." The words struck Marcus hard, but he kept his face stoic. Without another word, he returned to his station, finishing his shift in silence. That night, as he left the restaurant, he felt defeated. Bellemontes had been his dream, his home, but Jean-Pierre had turned it into a place that no longer welcomed him. After that, things only worsened. One evening, just before his shift ended, the restaurant manager pulled him aside. "Marcus," he began, unable to meet his gaze, "I'm sorry to tell you this, but Chef Laurent has decided to let you go. He says your style doesn't fit with Bellemonte's direction anymore." The words hit him like a freight train. Fired. Just like that, 7 years reduced to nothing. He felt humiliated and hurt, but also, strangely, relieved. At least the constant battle was over. Marcus held his head high, thanked the manager for the opportunity, and walked out with his dignity intact. In the weeks that followed, Marcus struggled to make sense of it all. Job offers weren't pouring in as he'd hoped. The culinary world in New Orleans was tight-knit, and Jean-Pierre's influence extended far. With each passing day, the sting of rejection faded, but his dreams felt distant, and he questioned if he would ever find his place again. Then one day, as he was sipping coffee at a local cafe, a thought struck him. Maybe he didn't need to fit into someone else's vision of what food should be. Maybe it was time to create his own space, a place where his passion and heritage could be expressed freely. With renewed purpose, he spent the following months saving every penny he could, even taking on a part-time job at a bakery to fund his dream. He began drafting plans for a restaurant concept that felt authentically his, a place where Southern comfort food met the sophistication of French cuisine, all wrapped up in a welcoming atmosphere that celebrated the community. As he worked on his plans, he found that the bitterness of his experience at Bellemonte's began to dissolve, replaced by an unyielding determination. Jean-Pierre might have pushed him out, but in doing so, he had given Marcus the push he needed to reach for something even greater. 6 months after he left Bellemonte's, with a small storefront space secured and a modest kitchen assembled, Marcus stood in the middle of what would soon be Hayes Place. Building the dream. The journey to establish Hayes Place was harder than Marcus could have ever anticipated. Each day brought a new set of challenges, from finding affordable kitchen equipment to navigating the seemingly endless maze of permits and licenses. But through every obstacle, Marcus reminded himself why he was doing this. He had a vision that was his own, one that could inspire others and bring something new to the community he loved. With every piece of equipment he managed to source, and every signature he obtained, Marcus could feel his dream taking shape. He was relentless, often working long hours alone in the small space he'd leased, patching walls, setting up tables, and arranging the kitchen. Some nights, he barely slept, lying awake as ideas for the menu danced through his mind. While the task seemed insurmountable, he could almost see it. Hayes Place, bustling with people, each dish a celebration of his heritage and creativity. One day, while cleaning the space, Marcus heard a knock at the door. When he opened it, he was surprised to see Mr. Raymond, the owner of a local produce shop, standing there with a box of fresh vegetables. "Marcus, I heard you were starting something of your own. Thought I'd bring you some fresh ingredients on the house, just to get you started," Mr. Raymond said, his weathered face breaking into a smile. "I know it's not much, but you know, sometimes all we need is a little encouragement." Marcus felt a swell of gratitude. He remembered all the times he'd walked to Mr. Raymond's shop after his shift at Bellemonte's, talking about the dream he had of one day running his own place. He thanked Mr. Raymond, who clasped his hand warmly. "People around here believe in you, Marcus. We all saw what you could do at Bellamontes. Now we're excited to see what you'll do with a place of your own," Mr. Raymond said before leaving. Encouraged by the support of his community, Marcus poured himself into the restaurant's opening. He reached out to other local suppliers, seeking high-quality ingredients to ensure his dishes would taste as fresh and flavorful as possible. His menu would include dishes inspired by his grandmother's recipes, with a twist that made them his own. For instance, he dreamed of reinventing shrimp and grits, serving it with a rich, spiced tomato-based sauce that would add depth and complexity. Word about Hayes' place spread quickly among the locals, many of whom had heard about Marcus's journey. They admired his resilience and were eager to support his new venture. Every time Marcus would be out buying supplies, someone would stop him to ask when the opening was. He could feel their excitement, and it made him work even harder. With the help of his wife, Angela, and a few close friends, the restaurant began to take shape. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Angela walked in with a surprise. She carried a neatly wrapped box, and as she handed it to Marcus, her eyes sparkled with pride. "I know you've been working nonstop, and I thought this might help you remember just how far you've come," she said. Marcus opened the box to find a custom-made chef's coat. Emblazoned on the chest were the words Chef Marcus Hayes, with a small, embroidered emblem of a bowl and spoon, a nod to his grandmother's influence. Overcome with emotion, he hugged Angela tightly. "You have no idea what this means to me," he whispered, holding back tears. It was more than just a coat. It was a symbol of his journey, of his fight to prove himself in a world that hadn't always been welcoming. "Wear it with pride," Angela said. "You've earned every bit of this." With the opening day just around the corner, Marcus couldn't afford to lose momentum. He recruited a small team, including his old friend Reggie, a former line cook from Bellamontes who had also felt the sting of Jean-Pierre's rigid kitchen. Reggie was thrilled to join him, saying, "You've got the talent, man, and I've got the loyalty. Let's make this place unforgettable." The day before the grand opening, Marcus gathered his team in the modest dining area, surrounded by the carefully arranged tables, freshly painted walls, and gleaming kitchen. There was a nervous energy among them as they anticipated what lay ahead. "Tomorrow, we make history," Marcus began, his voice filled with determination. "This isn't just a restaurant. It's a place for us, a place that's about real food and real people. No more dismissals, no more being pushed aside. We're here to show everyone that our food, our flavors, and our stories deserve to be celebrated." The small team cheered, their excitement filling the room. Together, they practiced each dish on the menu, working late into the night to perfect every element. Marcus was in his element, guiding his team through every step, his eyes lighting up with passion as they brought his dishes to life. He couldn't wait to see the expressions on people's faces as they tasted his creations, dishes that told his story and honored his roots. On the morning of the grand opening, Marcus was greeted by a line of eager patrons stretching around the block. Word had spread far and wide, and the people of New Orleans had shown up to support him. Some familiar faces from Bellamontes stood in line, ready to taste the food they'd missed since Marcus's departure. Others were curious newcomers, drawn in by the buzz surrounding the new restaurant with the talented black chef everyone was talking about. Inside, the kitchen was a controlled whirlwind of activity. Marcus moved with precision and confidence, leading his team as they executed each dish to perfection. The air was filled with the aromas of simmering gumbo, seared meats, and fresh herbs. For the first time in months, Marcus felt truly alive, as if the pieces of his life were finally falling into place. As the first orders went out, Marcus took a moment to look out into the dining area. There, sitting at one of the tables, was Mr. Raymond, who gave Marcus an encouraging thumbs up. Marcus smiled and nodded, grateful for the support that had come from so many corners of his community. The first few guests took their bites, and Marcus watched their reactions carefully. He saw eyes widening in delight, nods of approval, and heard murmurs of appreciation. The fusion of flavors, the balance of Southern comfort with French sophistication, resonated with the diners. Plates returned to the kitchen empty, with compliments sent back for the chef. Table 5 loved the gumbo, Reggie announced as he passed by Marcus. Said it's the best they've ever had. Marcus allowed himself a moment of pride. This wasn't just validation. It was the culmination of years of hard work and sacrifice. Every compliment reminded him of his journey, the struggle, and the strength he had found within himself to overcome adversity. In that moment, he knew he was exactly where he was meant to be. As the evening wore on, Marcus's heart swelled with gratitude. People laughed, shared stories, and reveled in the warmth of the space he'd created. He'd wanted Hayes Place to feel like home, a place where people could come together over good food and a welcoming atmosphere, and he had succeeded. Near the end of the night, Marcus took a moment to step outside and breathe in the cool night air. As he looked up at the sign that read Hayes Place, he felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. This was his legacy, his testament to resilience and passion. He had taken the bitterness of his experience at Bellamonte's and transformed it into something beautiful, something that honored his roots and his craft. Inside, his staff continued to work with pride, preparing the last few dishes of the night. Marcus walked back into the bustling kitchen, where his team greeted him with smiles and nods of respect. He was their leader, their chef, and he had earned every bit of it. That night, as the last guest left, Marcus looked around the now empty dining room, feeling the deep sense of peace. He'd done it. Against all odds, he had created a place where he could be himself, where his food and his vision could thrive. Hayes Place was more than just a restaurant. It was a home for him, his team, and his community. And with the first successful night behind him, Marcus knew it was only the beginning. Rising tides. Hayes Place quickly became more than just a local favorite. It grew into a culinary landmark that people traveled from across the city, and even neighboring towns, to experience. Word spread of Marcus's unique fusion of Southern comfort and French elegance, and soon food bloggers, local journalists, and critics began writing about his restaurant with glowing reviews. Each time Marcus read a new article or saw a new blog post praising his work, he felt a wave of pride, remembering the rocky path he'd walked to get here. In those early weeks, Marcus's life was a whirlwind of early mornings and late nights. Every day, he opened Hayes Place with the same sense of excitement as he had on that very first day. It was exhausting, but he was fueled by the sheer passion he held for his craft, by the desire to build something that would endure. Angela was by his side, helping him in any way she could. She managed the reservations, handled the finances, and even ran errands to ensure everything was in place. Her steady support was the foundation he leaned on. One afternoon, as he prepared for the dinner service, Marcus noticed a group of people at a corner table. Among them was Madame Claudette Beaufort, a revered food critic known for her discerning palate and unforgiving reviews. Marcus's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected a critic of her stature to visit so soon. Madame Beaufort was known for her loyalty to traditional French cuisine, and she'd been vocal about her disdain for anything she deemed overly experimental. Marcus knew she would scrutinize every element of his dishes, so he doubled down, making sure everything that left his kitchen that night was as close to perfect as possible. With his team in sync and the kitchen buzzing, Marcus meticulously prepared Madame Beaufort's table's orders. He plated his signature shrimp and grits with the spicy tomato sauce, garnishing it with a light sprinkle of fresh herbs and a drizzle of sauce for added flair. He checked each dish for consistency, tasting everything to ensure the flavors were balanced. When the dishes were ready, he handed them off to the server with a quiet prayer. From his spot in the kitchen, Marcus watched as Madame Beaufort took her first bite. Her face was unreadable, her expression focused as she tasted the dish. Seconds felt like hours as he waited for some kind of reaction. Finally, she looked up, made eye contact with him through the kitchen pass, and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Marcus's heart leaped. A nod from Madame Beaufort was as good as gold. When she left that evening, she paused on her way out, turning to Marcus with a slight smile. "This was unexpected, Mr. Hayes. I didn't think I'd enjoy something so far from my usual preferences. You have a talent, and you respect the ingredients. That's rare," she said before walking out. The next morning, Madame Beaufort's review was everywhere. She had written about Hayes' Place with an enthusiasm Marcus hadn't expected, calling it a bold reimagining of fusion cuisine that doesn't lose sight of authenticity. She praised his skill in blending flavors and techniques in a way that felt both innovative and respectful to the roots of each dish. The impact of her review was immediate. The phone rang non-stop with reservation requests, and within days, Marcus's modest dining room was fully booked for weeks. But with the praise and increased attention came a new wave of challenges. Marcus suddenly found himself facing the strain of managing a rapidly growing business. The surge in customers meant he needed more staff to keep up with the demand. He expanded his kitchen team, hiring a few additional line cooks and servers, but the growth brought growing pains. The tight-knit, family-like atmosphere Marcus had cultivated felt stretched thin. New hires had to be trained, systems adjusted, and the once seamless flow of service began to experience snags. One of his new hires, Miguel, a young and enthusiastic line cook, had potential but struggled with the high expectations. On one busy Saturday night, Miguel burned a batch of gumbo, causing a delay that rippled through the kitchen. Marcus could feel the pressure mounting as customers began to grow restless. He quickly stepped in, guiding Miguel through the correct technique, his voice calm but firm, reminding him of the importance of each detail. "Take a breath, Miguel," Marcus said, placing a reassuring hand on the young cook's shoulder. "This isn't just food, it's an experience we're creating. Every detail matters." Miguel nodded, visibly relieved, and the night continued without further issues. By the end of the shift, he approached Marcus with a look of gratitude. "Thank you for being patient with me, chef," he said. "I won't let you down." The high standards Marcus set for Hayes' Place were rooted in his desire to give each guest a perfect experience. He took pride in mentoring his team, teaching them not just the technical skills, but the philosophy behind the food. He wanted them to see cooking as he did, not just as a job, but as an art that had the power to touch people's lives. As Hayes' Place grew, Marcus found himself facing another unexpected challenge. One evening, after the last guest had left and he was locking up, he noticed a familiar face watching him from the other side of the street. It was Jean-Pierre Laurent, his former head chef from Bellamontes. Marcus hadn't seen him since the day he'd been fired, but now here was Jean-Pierre, watching Hayes' Place with a look that bordered on contempt. The encounter unsettled Marcus, but he brushed it off, focusing instead on his restaurant and the people who believed in him. Still, over the following weeks, Jean-Pierre's presence seemed to linger. He would occasionally show up in the area, sometimes even stopping by to speak with vendors Marcus had relationships with. Rumors began to circulate that Jean-Pierre was looking to expand Bellamonte's influence, planning to open a new restaurant not far from Hayes' Place. The whispers grew louder, and soon Marcus started receiving calls from suppliers, informing him that Jean-Pierre was offering them higher prices to secure their loyalty. Some of his regular suppliers couldn't afford to refuse the lucrative deals, and Marcus watched in frustration as reliable sources for his ingredients began to dwindle. It was a subtle but deliberate attempt to sabotage Hayes' Place, and Marcus knew he was being targeted. Jean-Pierre was threatened by his success and determined to bring him down. Angela noticed the tension building in Marcus. One night, after he had vented about Jean-Pierre's interference, she sat beside him, holding his hand. "You've built this place from the ground up, Marcus," she reminded him. "Jean-Pierre may have money and connections, but he doesn't have your heart or your resilience. Don't let him get to you." Her words gave him strength. Marcus reached out to other local farmers and suppliers. forming new relationships that weren't just transactional, but based on mutual respect and trust. Many of them admired Marcus's journey and were happy to support his restaurant, despite the influence Jean-Pierre wielded. In the weeks that followed, Marcus also started hosting community events at Hayes Place. He invited young culinary students from local schools to learn about the art of cooking, offering them a glimpse into the world of fusion cuisine and inspiring them to pursue their own dreams. These events weren't just about promoting his restaurant. They were about giving back to the community that had lifted him up. One evening, while he was preparing for one of these events, a young girl named Alicia approached him. She was part of a local high school culinary program and had been invited by Marcus to help in the kitchen for the night. "Chef Hayes," she began, her voice shy but determined. "I just wanted to say thank you for giving us this opportunity. Seeing someone like you succeed, it makes me believe I can do it too." Her words moved him, and he smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "You absolutely can, Alicia," he said. "Just remember, it's not the obstacles you face that define you. It's how you rise above them. Always believe in yourself, no matter what anyone else says." As the night progressed, Marcus watched Alicia and the other young students move around the kitchen, their faces alight with excitement. He knew that by opening Hayes Place, he'd done more than just build a restaurant. He'd created a place of hope, resilience, and inspiration. When the event ended, Marcus sat in his now empty dining room, reflecting on the journey he had taken to get here. Despite the challenges and the ongoing interference from Jean-Pierre, he felt a sense of peace. Hayes Place wasn't just surviving. It was thriving, and with each passing day, it was becoming a symbol of what could be achieved with hard work, community, and a refusal to let others define his worth. As he gazed at the walls of his restaurant, he imagined the countless stories that would unfold here, the lives he would touch through his food and his vision. He knew that his journey was far from over. Hayes Place was just the beginning, and no matter what obstacles lay ahead, he was ready to face them head-on, his heart and his kitchen as resilient as ever. The tides turned. As Hayes Place continued to grow, so did Marcus's influence in the culinary world. Customers flocked to experience the unique dishes he served, crafted with love and infused with the flavors of his roots. Marcus's innovative fusion of Creole and French cuisine made his restaurant a gem in New Orleans, and with each passing week, his dreams solidified. However, with this success, the shadows cast by his former boss, Jean-Pierre, also loomed larger. Jean-Pierre's influence became more overt. First, it was the suppliers. Then, it was whispers among other restaurant owners. One evening, Marcus received a call from an old friend, Amanda, who managed a popular restaurant a few blocks away. "Marcus," she began cautiously, "I don't know how to say this, but there's talk going around. Jean-Pierre's spreading rumors that Hayes Place isn't as authentic as you say it is." Marcus gripped the phone tightly. "What do you mean by that?" Amanda hesitated before continuing. "He's telling people that you're just imitating classic French cuisine, calling it fusion to get away with it. And, well, he's saying you're stealing his recipes." Marcus felt a wave of anger, but forced himself to stay calm. "I appreciate you letting me know, Amanda. Thank you. I can't believe he'd stooped this low." After hanging up, Marcus sat in his empty restaurant, his mind racing. Jean-Pierre had already sabotaged his supply chain. Now he was attacking Marcus's reputation. It was one thing to compete, but it was another to deliberately smear someone's name in an industry where trust was everything. Marcus knew he couldn't let Jean-Pierre's accusations define him or his restaurant. Angela, who had been watching him silently, approached and placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Marcus, he's doing this because he's scared. He knows you're succeeding without him, without anyone's help. That's why he's trying so hard to tear you down." Marcus nodded, finding solace in her words. "I know, Angela, but it still hurts. This restaurant is my life. To have it dragged through the mud just because of one man's jealousy, it's exhausting." Angela sat beside him, her voice gentle but resolute. "Then let's fight back, not with words or petty drama, but with what you do best: cooking. Show people what Hayes Place is about. Let them taste your passion." Her words sparked a new resolve in him. If Jean-Pierre was going to try and smear his name, Marcus would rise above it by proving his worth. He decided to host a special chef's tasting night at Hayes Place, where he would unveil a new menu inspired by his family recipes, blending traditional Creole ingredients with refined techniques that honored his heritage and culinary journey. The days leading up to the event were a whirlwind of activity. Marcus worked tirelessly, pouring every ounce of his energy into designing a menu that showcased his roots and creativity. He spent hours experimenting with sauces, tweaking spices, and perfecting the plating, determined to create dishes that would tell a story on each plate. He wanted each course to evoke memories, to give his guests a taste of the love, struggle, and resilience that had shaped him. As the night of the chef's tasting approached, Marcus felt both excitement and nervousness. This event was a statement, a way to reclaim his name and remind his patrons why Hayes Place had become such a beloved spot in the city. He wanted his community to see the heart and soul behind every dish, to taste the difference that passion made. When the night arrived, the dining room was filled with loyal customers, local food bloggers, critics, and even some industry insiders who had heard about the controversy swirling around Marcus. Word of Jean-Pierre's rumors had spread, and many attendees were curious to see how Marcus would respond. The first course was a delicate appetizer of Creole spiced crab cakes, served with a lemon aioli and garnished with microgreens. Marcus knew that crab cakes were a classic, but he wanted to elevate the dish, adding a depth of flavor with spices that paid homage to his heritage. As plates left the kitchen, he watched the expressions of the diners, seeing eyes light up as they tasted the food. The reaction was everything he had hoped for. The second course was a gumbo, but not just any gumbo. This was his grandmother's recipe, handed down through generations, refined with French techniques. The dish was served in elegant porcelain bowls, the dark, rich broth filled with shrimp, sausage, and okra. Each bite was a journey, an immersion in the flavors of his childhood. As each course went out, Marcus felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. He was sharing his story with each dish, inviting people to understand not only his skill but the journey that had shaped him as a chef. The night was progressing beautifully, and Marcus felt a glimmer of pride. He could see that the crowd was moved, their skepticism giving way to admiration. Then, as he was plating the main course, a slow-cooked beef short rib glazed with a red wine reduction and accompanied by a creamy bed of grits, Marcus noticed a familiar face at one of the tables. It was Jean-Pierre, watching him with a cold, calculating gaze. His presence was unsettling, but Marcus took a deep breath, reminded himself of his purpose, and carried on. He wasn't going to let Jean-Pierre intimidate him, not tonight. The short rib went out, and diners gasped with delight at the tenderness of the meat, the way it melted in their mouths. The applause that followed was a testament to Marcus's triumph, a sign that his food had touched them, that his story had reached their hearts. The evening ended on a high note, with Marcus serving a dessert inspired by his grandmother's sweet potato pie, but reinvented with a caramel drizzle and a dusting of cinnamon, a tribute to his past with a sophisticated finish. As the guests began to leave, many came up to Marcus, thanking him for the experience. Madame Beaufort herself approached, her face glowing with approval. "You have done something remarkable here, Mr. Hayes," she said. "Tonight, you prove that true cuisine is about heart, not just technique. Your food speaks volumes." The words felt like validation, a confirmation that he was on the right path. After the last guest left, Marcus sank into a chair, exhaustion washing over him, but his heart was light. He had faced Jean-Pierre's presence, and through his food, had shown everyone who he truly was. The next morning, the reviews from the tasting night poured in. Local newspapers, food blogs, and social media were abuzz with praise for Marcus and Hayes Place. They described his dishes as inspired, groundbreaking, and a celebration of culture and passion. Marcus couldn't stop smiling as he read through each review, feeling a profound sense of accomplishment. He had not only silenced his critics, but also solidified Hayes Place as a staple in the culinary world of New Orleans. However, the story didn't end there. A few days later, Marcus received an invitation from the prestigious New Orleans Culinary Festival, a high-profile event that brought together the best chefs from around the city and beyond. They wanted him to present a cooking demonstration and participate in a panel about cultural fusion in cuisine. It was an incredible honor, one he hadn't dared to imagine. With the festival approaching, Marcus poured his energy into perfecting the dishes he would showcase. He chose to demonstrate a Creole-inspired bouillabaisse, a dish that represented the blending of French and Southern flavors in a way that was uniquely his. The day of the festival, he felt a mixture of nerves and excitement. But as he took the stage and began his demonstration, he found himself in his element, the cooking easing his nerves. The audience watched intently as he described the layers of flavor in his dish, explaining how he had learned each technique, how each ingredient told a part of his story. After his demonstration, the crowd erupted in applause, and Marcus felt the pride of his achievement wash over him like a wave. On the panel afterward, as he spoke about his journey, Marcus shared the challenges he had faced, the discrimination, the doubt, and the rumors that had nearly derailed him. He spoke candidly, hoping to inspire others who might be struggling in their own journeys. "It's not the obstacles that define us," Marcus said, his voice steady. "It's what we do in spite of them. Cooking is my way of telling my story, of sharing who I am, and no one can take that away from me." As he left the stage, Marcus felt like he had finally reclaimed his place in the culinary world. Hayes Place wasn't just a restaurant anymore. It was a movement, a symbol of resilience and the power of staying true to oneself. That night, as he returned to Hayes Place, he found his team waiting for him with smiles and cheers. Reggie, his loyal line cook, handed him a bottle of champagne, and they celebrated together, the restaurant filled with laughter and camaraderie. Marcus raised his glass, a grateful smile spreading across his face. "To Hayes Place," he said, looking around at the people who had made it all possible. "May we always stay true to ourselves and keep cooking from the heart." As the glasses clinked, Marcus felt a profound sense of belonging. Hayes Place was more than just a restaurant. It was a testament to the power of perseverance and the beauty of following one's dreams. No matter what challenges lay ahead, Marcus knew he was ready. This was his story, and it was only just beginning. The fires of adversity. The New Orleans Culinary Festival marked a pivotal moment for Marcus. After his panel and demonstration, he was inundated with offers from investors who wanted to help expand Hayes Place into a chain, invitations to collaborate on cookbooks, and inquiries from cooking schools interested in having him teach. His heart swelled with pride, knowing that his journey had come full circle. For years, he had fought for the chance to share his voice, and now he had a platform to amplify it. Yet, amidst the newfound success, Marcus faced an even greater challenge. As his reputation grew, so did Jean-Pierre's resentment. His former head chef could not accept the fact that Marcus had risen from the ashes of his firing and become a respected culinary figure. Jean-Pierre began to escalate his efforts to sabotage Marcus's hard-earned success. One evening, Marcus received an email from a prominent local food blogger who had attended the tasting event. It was an invitation to discuss a collaboration on an article about Southern French fusion cuisine. Excited, Marcus accepted and prepared for the meeting with high hopes. The blogger, Denise Malone, had built a strong following through her insightful takes on the city's evolving food culture. He hoped that working with her would allow Hayes Place to reach an even wider audience. On the day of the meeting, Denise greeted him warmly, and they settled into a quiet corner of the cafe. The conversation began pleasantly enough, with Denise asking questions about his inspiration, his culinary journey, and the struggles he'd faced. But soon, the questions took an unexpected turn. "Marcus, I'd like to address something before we proceed," Denise said, her tone shifting to one of caution. "There have been rumors circulating. Some people say that your dishes are a bit too similar to what's served at Bellamont's. Jean-Pierre Laurent claims you've been using his recipes as the foundation for your work at Hayes Place. Is there any truth to that?" Marcus felt a familiar pang of anger flare up. Jean-Pierre's accusations had already harmed his reputation enough. He met Denise's gaze, steady and resolute. "Jean-Pierre's claims are false. Hayes Place isn't built on Bellamont's recipes. It's built on my family's heritage, my experience, and my passion. The flavors, techniques, and inspirations here are my own." Denise nodded thoughtfully. "I appreciate your honesty, Marcus. I wanted to hear it from you directly. I can see how much of yourself you put into every dish. I'll be sure to highlight that in my article. I think people deserve to know the real story." The meeting ended on a positive note, but the encounter weighed heavily on Marcus. He knew that Jean-Pierre's accusations weren't just empty words. They had the power to erode the trust he'd built with his patrons and supporters. Later that night, he sat alone in Hayes Place, the dim light casting long shadows on the walls, and allowed himself a moment to confront his frustration. Angela joined him, sensing his distress. She slid into the seat across from him and took his hand in hers. "Marcus, you've faced worse before. This is just another hurdle, another test of your strength." "I know, Angela, but he's relentless," Marcus said, his voice filled with exhaustion. "Every time I think I've moved on, he finds another way to drag me back down." Angela's eyes softened. "You're right, he's relentless. But so are you. You didn't get here by letting people tell you what you can or can't do. You got here because you refuse to be anything other than yourself. And that's something he'll never be able to take away from you." Her words reignited a fire within him. She was right. He hadn't come this far by backing down. Jean-Pierre's smear campaign might create a temporary shadow over Hayes Place, but Marcus knew that authenticity would outlast deception. Determined to rise above, he decided to take control of his own narrative. The next morning, Marcus arranged a press conference. He invited the local media, food bloggers, and supporters to Hayes Place to address the rumors head-on. He wanted to clear the air, not only to protect his reputation, but also to reclaim his identity from the man who had tried to strip it from him. As the crowd gathered in the restaurant, Marcus stood before them, his heart pounding but his voice steady. "Thank you all for coming," he began, looking around at the familiar and unfamiliar faces. "I know there have been rumors, and I want to address them openly. Hayes Place is my life's work. Every dish you see here is a reflection of my heritage, my family's recipes, and my journey as a chef." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "My goal with Hayes Place has always been to create something unique, something that celebrates the blending of Southern and French cuisines in a way that honors both. I didn't come here to imitate anyone's work. I came here to share my story, my voice, and my vision." The crowd murmured in approval, and Marcus continued. "Hayes Place stands on its own. I invite anyone, supporters, skeptics, even Jean-Pierre himself, to come and taste our food. See for yourselves that we're not about copying or competing. We're about creating a space where people can experience the flavors that have shaped me." The press conference was a turning point. Articles emerged not about the rumors, but about Marcus's dedication, his courage in addressing the accusations, and the authenticity of his work. His story resonated with people on a deeper level, and the negative attention Jean-Pierre had tried to cast on him instead turned into a groundswell of support. However, just when Marcus thought he'd weathered the storm, he received devastating news. One evening, while going through the day's receipts, he received a call from a staff member informing him that there had been a fire in the kitchen. He rushed to Hayes Place, his heart in his throat, only to find fire trucks parked outside and smoke billowing from the building. Angela arrived soon after, gripping his hand tightly as they stood together, watching the firefighters douse the flames. As the smoke cleared, Marcus surveyed the damage. The fire had started in the kitchen, leaving much of it charred and unusable. The dining area was spared, but the heart of his restaurant, his kitchen, was in ruins. He felt a wave of despair wash over him. Everything he'd worked so hard for, the hours spent perfecting each dish, the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, it felt as though it had all gone up in smoke. The next day, an investigator confirmed his worst fears. The fire had been deliberately set. Someone had broken into the kitchen and ignited an accelerant near the gas line. Though there was no proof, Marcus knew in his gut who was responsible. Jean-Pierre's interference had reached a new level, one that threatened to destroy everything he had built. In the days that followed, the weight of the loss settled heavily on him. The restaurant was closed for repairs, and he was faced with mounting bills and the financial strain of restoring the kitchen. There were moments when he thought about giving up, about walking away and starting over somewhere else. But each time he reached that brink, he thought of his community, the patrons who had supported him, the students he had mentored, and the legacy he wanted to leave behind. Giving up wasn't an option. Marcus knew that if he backed down now, he'd be letting Jean-Pierre win. He'd be betraying everything he'd fought for. Determined to rebuild, Marcus launched a fundraiser, reaching out to his community for support. Word of the fire and the suspected sabotage spread quickly, and the response was overwhelming. Donations poured in from patrons, fellow chefs, and strangers who had been touched by his story. Local businesses offered to help with supplies, and friends volunteered their time to assist with the restoration. One evening, as Marcus stood in the half-repaired kitchen, he noticed a group of people outside. Opening the door, he found a crowd of regulars holding signs of support. They had gathered to show their solidarity, bringing homemade signs that read, "We stand with Marcus," and "Hayes Place forever." One by one, they stepped forward to share words of encouragement. An elderly woman, who had been a patron since the first day Hayes Place opened, approached him and placed her hand on his shoulder. "Marcus, this place has brought us so much joy. We won't let anyone take that away from us," she said, her eyes brimming with tears. In that moment, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. The support of his community filled him with strength, and he knew that Hayes Place wasn't just a restaurant. It was a symbol of resilience, of hope, of the power of a community united against adversity. With the funds raised and the support of his friends and neighbors, Marcus and his team worked tirelessly to restore Hayes Place. He spent long nights scrubbing the soot-stained walls, repairing equipment, and rebuilding the space that had come to mean so much to so many. Each day, he poured his love into the restoration, knowing that Hayes Place would emerge stronger, reborn from the ashes of adversity. After weeks of intense labor, Hayes Place reopened to a crowd of supporters that filled the street outside. As Marcus stepped into the dining room, he was met with a standing ovation. The applause, the cheers, and the faces of his community filled him with a profound sense of fulfillment. Looking out at the crowd, he felt an overwhelming gratitude for the people who had stood by him, who had believed in him even when it seemed like everything was lost. Hayes Place had weathered the storm, and Marcus knew that, no matter what challenges lay ahead, he would continue to rise, his spirit unbreakable, his vision unshakable. In the days that followed, Hayes Place thrived, not just as a restaurant, but as a testament to the resilience of one man's dream, the strength of a community, and the power of standing together against injustice. Marcus had emerged from the fire stronger, more determined, and with a deeper understanding of what it meant to truly overcome. The legacy carved in stone, Hayes Place reopened to a flood of support that defied Marcus's wildest dreams. The community rallied, filling the dining room night after night, and the reservations list grew longer with each passing week. It wasn't just a restaurant anymore. It had become a symbol of resilience, a place where every meal was a celebration of culture, identity, and defiance against the odds. As the restaurant thrived, Marcus received invitations to speak at culinary schools and local events. He shared his story with aspiring chefs, recounting his journey, the challenges he'd faced, and the hard lessons he'd learned. The students hung on his every word, and he saw in their eyes the same spark he'd had when he first discovered his love for cooking. Standing in front of them, he realized his journey was no longer just about his own success. It was about leaving a legacy that others could look up to. One evening, after a successful dinner service, a familiar face walked into Hayes' place. Jean-Pierre Laurent entered with a measured gait, his expression a strange mixture of resentment and admiration. The dining room fell silent as patrons noticed his presence. The staff shifted uncomfortably, exchanging wary glances, but Marcus met Jean-Pierre's gaze calmly, standing tall. Jean-Pierre approached the counter and nodded, gesturing to an empty seat. "May we speak privately, Marcus?" With a calm he didn't know he possessed, Marcus nodded and motioned toward a quiet corner of the restaurant. The two men sat, the hum of the restaurant fading as Marcus waited for Jean-Pierre to speak. "Marcus," Jean-Pierre began, his voice soft, almost defeated. "I underestimated you. I believed that you would fade into the background, that you would fail. But you didn't." He sighed heavily. "Hayes' Place has not only survived, it has thrived. And the people, they love you. You have accomplished something I never could." Marcus looked at the man who had once belittled him, who had sabotaged him out of fear and jealousy. He had expected this conversation to be bitter, but instead he felt a surprising calm. "Jean-Pierre," Marcus replied, his tone even, "I built this place because I believed in my food and my story. Hayes' Place isn't about me proving anything to you. It's about sharing who I am with the people who have supported me." Jean-Pierre's eyes flickered with an emotion that Marcus couldn't quite place. Was it regret? Remorse? "You were right," Jean-Pierre admitted finally. "I was threatened. Your talent, your vision. It was more than I could handle. But after everything, I can see now that you were always meant to create something of your own." The words hung in the air, a quiet acknowledgement of a rivalry that had, at times, threatened to destroy Marcus but had ultimately forged him into the chef and man he was today. There was a long silence between them, each man lost in his own thoughts. Then, in a surprising gesture, Jean-Pierre extended his hand. "Congratulations, Marcus. Hayes' Place is remarkable." Marcus looked at the outstretched hand and hesitated. This was the man who had nearly destroyed him, who had tried to strip away everything he had worked for. Yet, looking into Jean-Pierre's weary eyes, Marcus saw something he hadn't expected: vulnerability. He reached out and shook his hand firmly. "Thank you, Jean-Pierre. I hope you find what you're looking for." The interaction ended with that handshake, a quiet truce that acknowledged both their journeys. Jean-Pierre left, and as Marcus watched him go, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He had forgiven, not for Jean-Pierre's sake, but for his own. This wasn't about vengeance or proving himself to anyone. It was about the legacy he was building, a legacy he was finally ready to embrace fully. In the following months, Hayes' Place flourished like never before. Marcus expanded his staff, hiring more local talent and giving young, aspiring chefs an opportunity to learn and grow. He implemented a mentorship program, allowing culinary students from nearby schools to shadow him and his team. Each new face that joined Hayes' Place brought fresh energy, and Marcus felt a sense of pride watching his kitchen become a haven for creativity, resilience, and community. One evening, a young chef named Tamara, one of his new hires, stayed behind after her shift to speak with him. Her voice trembled as she spoke, her words filled with gratitude. "Chef Hayes, I just wanted to thank you. Working here, it's given me a purpose I didn't think I'd find. You make us all feel like we're part of something special." Marcus smiled, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Tamara, you are part of something special. Hayes' Place isn't just mine. It belongs to everyone who walks through these doors and adds their story to the mix." Keep putting your heart into your work, and I promise you'll go far." As Tamara left, Marcus lingered in the quiet of the dining room, reflecting on how far he had come. The restaurant had become more than a sanctuary. It was a testament to his journey and the resilience of everyone who had stood beside him. It was a place where each dish told a story and every ingredient carried a memory. In the months that followed, Hayes Place reached new heights. Marcus published a cookbook, From Creole Roots to Culinary Heights, filled with his original recipes and the stories behind each dish. The book became a bestseller, its pages filled not only with recipes but with reflections on his heritage, his journey, and his hard-earned wisdom. Marcus poured his soul into those pages, hoping that his story would inspire others to embrace their unique voices, no matter the obstacles. One evening, while signing books at a local bookstore, an elderly woman approached him, her eyes twinkling with pride. "Marcus," she said, clutching his book to her chest, "I was one of your first customers. I've watched you grow, watched Hayes Place become something beautiful. You've shown all of us what it means to believe in yourself, no matter the odds." Marcus felt a lump in his throat, deeply moved by her words. "Thank you," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "People like you, you're the reason I kept going. Hayes Place is as much yours as it is mine." The woman smiled, a single tear sliding down her cheek. "You've created more than just a restaurant, Marcus. You've created a legacy." The years passed, and Hayes Place continued to flourish. Marcus received numerous accolades and awards, but what mattered most to him was the impact he was leaving on his community. The restaurant became a place where people gathered to celebrate life's milestones, to seek comfort in hard times, and to experience food that told a story. One day, as Marcus was preparing to leave after a busy night, he noticed a young boy standing outside, staring through the window with wide eyes. The boy couldn't have been older than 12, his face pressed against the glass as he watched Marcus clean up. Marcus stepped outside, smiling warmly. "Hey there, are you hungry?" The boy nodded shyly. "Yes, sir. I heard people say the food here is special." Marcus knelt down to meet the boy's gaze, his voice soft. "It is special, and you know why. Because every dish is made with heart." He glanced back into the restaurant, then smiled. "How about you come in and try something?" The boy's face lit up, and Marcus led him inside, seating him at a table. He prepared a small plate of his signature shrimp and grits, the dish that had come to define Hayes Place, and watched as the boy took his first bite. The boy's eyes widened with delight, and Marcus felt a familiar warmth fill his chest. "What's your name?" Marcus asked. "Jeremiah," the boy replied, his mouth full. "Jeremiah, if you ever want to learn how to cook, you just come by. I'll teach you everything I know." The boy grinned, nodding enthusiastically. "Really, you'd teach me?" Marcus nodded, his heart swelling with pride. "Of course. Hayes Place is a place for everyone, Jeremiah. And one day, maybe you'll be the one serving up dishes that bring people joy." As Jeremiah finished his meal and left with a hopeful smile, Marcus felt a sense of peace settle over him. Hayes Place had become more than just a restaurant. It was a legacy of love, resilience, and community, a place where people could feel at home and discover the beauty of food made with purpose. Years later, as Marcus grew older, he passed the torch to the chefs he had mentored. Hayes Place remained a beloved institution, carrying on his vision, his recipes, and his spirit. His story lived on in every dish, every laugh shared over a meal, and every aspiring chef who walked through its doors. Marcus had turned his pain into purpose, his struggle into strength. Hayes Place stood as a testament to the power of resilience and the beauty of a dream pursued with unwavering heart. It would live on long after him, a place where future generations could taste his legacy and be inspired to create their own. And so, with a full heart and a spirit at peace, Marcus stepped back, knowing that Hayes Place would forever be his legacy, a legacy carved in stone, flavored with love, and seasoned with the resilience of a life well lived.